Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the University of Idaho Extension's Protect Your Farm Business, where we'll be talking about all different types of agribusiness related topics. As you might have seen in a previous video, you definitely know that we cover a broad range of topics. And I do have a little bit of a lag on my end, so if you have questions, feel free to ask questions throughout this live, and I'd be happy to answer them. And if I don't know the answer, I'll get back to you with some sort of answer. So please feel free to email me or reach out to me, and all of the links that I'll be talking about today are in the description box. So last week we talked about cash rental rates and lease agreements and how you can actually find resources online that can help put together these lease agreements. So if you're interested in that, then you can go see last week's video. As you can see, I am back in my office, so you might hear a little different background noise since I am in the office versus when I'm at home. But I'm excited to be back, and today I wanted to talk about this topic that's kind of controversial, and it's called urban sprawl. So I don't know if you've heard of this or if you have been asked about it. Maybe you have experienced it, but I wanted to really talk about this topic because last week we talked about rental rates and leases and making sure farmland was staying in production when you're talking about those type of things versus maybe selling it to commercial real estate. And so what I talked about last week, I think lends itself well into what we'll talk about this week. So I had a reporter actually come and talk to me and ask me what my opinion was on urban sprawl. And let me just say urban sprawl is uncontrolled expansion of urban areas. And so when you think of this, you might be thinking of the Boise area, or if you live in a different state, one of your metropolitan areas growing, their suburbs growing, and so the city is actually becoming larger in size, encroaching on maybe cropland or natural resources, and so that's what we're talking about. But I had this reporter come and talk to me and ask about how I felt about it and how could farmers keep their land in production. As I love succession planning, and that is my passion, I did not mind discussing some of these ideas that you have that you can put into place to protect your farm, to maybe keep it in production for as long as you wish. And so, but when I think of urban sprawl, I think, like I said, again, those metropolitan areas like Boise. Well, yeah, so Boise is growing. It was actually the 8th fastest growing city this past year. So the metropolitan area is growing out. And so when you think of producers that are in Canyon County or Ada County, they have a lot of pressure to sell because in this article that I've linked by a Boise State study, they said they could get about $45,000 an acre for that farmland in those two counties because of the urban pressure. And so I was thinking, well, that's a Treasure Valley problem. That's a Boise problem. But the reporter was asking me because she said that it's happening here in Twin Falls, which is where I live. And so if it's happening where I live, then I believe it's probably happening to a lot more places. And it is becoming a very prevalent thing. And so a lot of people say urban sprawl is because of population. So population increases, therefore we need more housing, and it expands larger and larger. Well, actually, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, they're saying that urban sprawl is driven by increased affluence, attractive land and housing prices, and the desire for larger homes with more amenities, such as yards, household appliances, storage space, and privacy. So when you think of people that live in New York City and they live in these high sky-rise apartments, well, the people that wanted an actual home moved outside of the city, and they kept going further, and their commutes kept getting longer, but they were having those amenities. And so when they described that, I said, oh, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? And so many experts also believe that weak planning laws and single-use zoning also contribute to urban sprawl. So urban sprawl is taking a lot of agricultural acres out of production for forever. Once they have a house on there, it's really hard to convert that land back into agriculture in the future. And that same BSU study, which is linked in the description box, said that between 1969 and 2012, 30% of Canyon and Ada County farmland was lost, while Idaho as a whole state lost 18% of their farmland in that time frame. In the article, it was saying, like I said, that people were seeing that $45,000 an acre. Producers that were approached for this amount of money were saying, I couldn't make this if I lived another 300 years. Well, I took the check. So what do you think about that? Would you take a check if they were going to pay you that much money? And let's think about this. So farmland prices, commodity prices, have been kind of down in the past couple of years. And it's been really hard to get by and break even. And you are a producer and you are taking care of the land and you love what you do. But when you see a paycheck that size, what would you do? And so today I wanted to go through just a little bit of information and a couple of graphics that you'll see on these PowerPoint slides. And I just think it is really interesting because yeah, we can think of it as only being in the metro areas, but all of the small towns are also growing a lot in our area. And so I just wanted to show a little bit of these graphs. So if you think of Boise area, like I said, it has really increased. This is only within city limits, and so it's not even accounting for that metropolitan area, the huge increase in Nampa, in Caldwell. And so this is only showing the city of Boise. And so when we think of that, it's kind of scary seeing that huge gain in population. Again, population is not the only contributor to urban sprawl, but it is a large contributor. And so if you think of Twin Falls, where I live, you think maybe it's more of a small town. But as you can see, the population increase has been dramatic as well as Boise. And so we're just looking at these things just to think about what's happening. Where are these people living? Well, I know here they're building more houses and they're taking land out of agriculture. And so I just wanted to show you that what have ag land prices been over the past couple of years. So commodity markets, if they're low, how are producers able to expand, are able to pay for more farmland? And so it's really hard because in the good commodity years, people are saying, oh, we need to buy more land because we have the money. Whereas in low commodity years, they don't have the money. But what we're seeing is that actually outside investors are looking at agricultural land as a really good portfolio diversification strategy. And so they're buying up agricultural land in these huge kind of investment groups. And so they're keeping the price of ag land pretty steady, if not keeping it increased. So if you thought that only farmer-to-farmer purchases were happening, then a low commodity price would then make the land value price go down. If you can't pay for the land and no one is able to buy the land, then you have to decrease the price for someone to buy it. Well, that's not the case anymore. People outside of agriculture are buying the land. And It could be for real estate purposes and building houses, or it could be for investment purposes. And then they would rent. So they would use that cash rent option or leasing option like I discussed in the last video. And so you can see in this graph, which is from Northwest Farm Credit, and it's the value for sales transactions for 40 acres and larger. And so those are larger plots of land, but you can see that in 19 it actually went down a lot. But in those good commodity years like 2012, you saw it go up, and then it's steadily been around the same, above 4,000 until 2019, which I think a lot of people felt pressure from the commodity markets in that year, and so the prices actually did drop. Actually, you can see that average price per acre is steadily increasing, whereas the number of sales is the one decreasing. And so, sorry, excuse me for my mess up, but in 2012, when we had a high commodity year, more people are selling or buying because they're able to, because they have the money and commodity markets look good. So investors want to get in, and so there's a lot more sales. And so you can see that the prices, though, have continued to go up, even in low commodity years. And so with that, if you think about Idaho, and so that was the Pacific Northwest, or the West as a whole, in prices. And so in the Idaho Annual Statistical Bulletin, which NASS gives out, they do give out the value per acre. And if you could look at Idaho, so I'm going to move my face. If you look at Idaho and you look from 2015 all the way to 2019, you see that we go from $2,500 an acre in 2015 all the way up to $3,000 an acre, which is 4.5. Well, there's a 4.5 increase from 2018 to 2019. And so we are still increasing. Our land values are still increasing. And I would say as a state, these land values are still pretty low of what our producers are actually seeing. I know that in Cassia County, which is the county that has Burley, they're seeing agricultural land prices, if you have irrigation and water, about $14,000 an acre. And so these are huge prices per acre that producers in low commodity years cannot afford to pay for, but outside investors can. And so here's the little bit of the issues of where land rent and leasing versus what you can actually get, so land value. And it's really hard. This subject is really hard because you don't necessarily know these outside investors and they don't know you, but they could be buying cropland around you and outbidding you, which could be a scary situation. So I know this topic is, like I said, very controversial, but the whole point of today was to bring your mind about planning for the future and the future of your Idaho farmland. And I just really wanted to drive home the point that if you are in this to be a farmer and you hope your kids are farmers in the future and you hope that farm is always in production, then you need to plan to have it that way. And that is succession planning and estate planning. And you need to meet with someone to make sure that that will stay the case. Because if you are getting suburban area backed up onto your property, onto your ag land, there is going to be a lot of pressure for you to sell or for your grandchildren to sell one day. And I just really want you to start thinking about planning for the future and making sure that if you want that land in production for forever, to take the necessary steps to make that happen. So hopefully this has been helpful. I will now open it up for questions if anyone has any. I haven't seen any come through while on the live, but I will be back next week to talk about some insurance programs. because I will be talking at a beef webinar tomorrow discussing beef or livestock insurance. And so I'll be discussing that on our live next week as well. So thank you for listening, and I hope to see you next week.